blessed ones who are here, and all who are participating now and in the future, far and wide across the face of the earth. Without exception, you, each and every one, have come forth from the heart of the sun behind the sun, the spiritual sun, both the sun of our system and indeed from the very heart of the great central sun, which we take to be that place in consciousness, which is the origin of all identity and all selfhood, as it has emerged from out the glorious presence of God, that one universal and absolute presence, of which each one is such a marvelous individualization. This week marks the culmination of a glorious time that we have had the opportunity of basking in a more than ordinary outpouring of this cosmic light from out the heart of the spiritual sun. Will you please refrain from making any distinction in your mind between our local sun that we look to as the home of Helios and Vesta and the heart of the great central sun. For indeed, their oneness is far more great and profound than any outer distinction that might be made. And thus, you will allow yourself to know yourself to be one of those who has stepped forth from the source of that spiritual outpouring of universal light and life and love, which is the source of all good things here upon this earth. We have been blessed to bathe in the great outpouring of cosmic light, which means, in essence, a universal consciousness. It is not mere words, but it is a gentle pressure of consciousness that speaks of heart and home and gently washes away all that is unreal in our world and replaces it with that which is most real. The service of our New Year's conclave and of this blessed week that we have spent likewise in the Emerald Ray has been multifaceted, but with one overriding message and momentum in kind, which was represented graphically in that magnificent thought form of the New Year's class, representative of your own full selfhood, of your own individualized being, of the mighty presence that you are, standing there in the doorway of the ascended master's realm, holding open that doorway and affirming with your outer consciousness, I am the open door which no man can shut. Affirming, I am the light that lights every man and woman who comes into this world. Oh, if you were only able, from time to time, to be lifted into the full, unmitigated consciousness of the individuality of your own mighty presence, you would perceive there something breathtaking to behold. For you would realize that the impetus of the individual mind of that presence its divine intent, its givingness of its love, that all of these things are in fact, with your call and your conscious identification, facilitating the focus of the brilliant, dazzling outpouring of the conscious Christ light into the microcosm of your very own world. Undoubtedly, from your outer perspective, you may not fully appreciate this. You might find it hard to reach that level. But pause for a few moments and rest in the glorious truth, which is that, regardless of outer appearances to the contrary, regardless of world adversity, via the great focusing, lensing power of the emerald ray. The emerald ray and the action of the all-seeing eye of God, focused to a pinpoint of concentration, right where your four lower bodies operate, is holding the vision of the mature firstborn Christos as the manifest perfection of your own Christhood. Stepping forth and being the fact of life for you here in this outer world of form. You yourself will need to actually meditate upon this concept for quite a while so that you may begin to cooperate more and more with this action that is being held so very dynamically by your own beloved mighty I Am presence, now more than ever, because first of all, you yourself have been equipped and authorized and encouraged to know yourself as the truth of that mighty I Am presence. You have the pressure of your own acceptance. You have the pressure of your steadfast decree to know that you are that presence. You have fulfilled the law of octaves. You have called for this. And so all of heaven is now a tiptoe to pressurize your world with the emerald ray and to focus in the teeth of all adverse appearances, regardless of what they might be, the full manifestation of that perfection of your Christhood, which you are. One of the aspects of this that will facilitate the speed with which you are able to accept the pressure of this focus, of this Christ perfection, is as there is restored to you gently, moment by moment. Perhaps not so much the specificity of remembering when and exactly how you stepped forth from the sun, but as this occurs and as you meditate on the truth of the story of your Genesis, as it is portrayed for you in the Godhead Charioteer's painting, more and more you will realize that you are not really of this world, that you are not really of the name that you wear, necessarily just a member of your immediate family or community, or even one nation or one race of peoples, but that you yourself as an individual are the firstborn of the Son, and that you can draw forth the fullness of that divine inheritance here into your life. So that memory, as it comes back to you more and more, will convey to you the surety, the sense of assurance that you are not acting a falsehood or some abject desire that is hopeless, but that you are simply remembering, reawakening to the truth of whence you have come and whither you are going. As you rise to touch that memory, there will also be other aspects of consciousness that come to you. One of the things that one of the Lady Masters this week, beloved Leto, referred to was the conferment of more and more of the actual body and garment of consciousness of your own Christ presence. Understand that whereas your outer four lower bodies are inhabitants of this earthly world and have a history, so to speak, of incarnations here in this world, this is not the case when it comes to your own beloved Christ presence. And so as there is the marriage, the alchemical marriage of this body of awareness, the Christ presence, blending with your purified memory, billowing out to fill your mind, suffusing its glow of well-being, of amity and I-ness through your feeling world. As that consciousness settles down as a robe of authority upon your shoulders, with it will come a new glorious sense of where it is that you belong, with whom you belong. And instead of you having this idea of looking at your family tree or your driver's license or looking at any of your DNA results, instead of doing any of that, you will study the lines of character in your own Christ presence and receive, although it might be not so much a worded understanding, but there will dawn upon your consciousness an awareness that there is a life that is going on simultaneously, side by side with this prosaic world that is out here in this world of form. Surely you can realize that even now there are many tremendously contrasting, almost contradictory experiences that take place on the earth surface. Different parts of the world right now are experiencing drastically conflicting types of experience. Here in America, we have had peace in our land for a long time, but other parts of the world have not known peace for hundreds or thousands of years. They are in an almost state of perpetual strife and warfare. Does the perpetual strife in other parts of the world mean that it is impossible for there to be peace? Does it invalidate the experience of those who have had peace or prosperity? Indeed, it does not. And if you can begin to understand how there is such a vast range of human experience, but it is all, in essence, at least from the mortal perspective, accurate, then it is also possible for you to appreciate that there are other realities more permanent and lasting than what your outer self has experienced. And lo and behold, you will come to understand that side by side with the temporary, passing, ephemeral comings and goings of events in your day-to-day life, or even from one lifetime to another. Behind all of this great stage play of mortal life, there is an ongoing drama that has eternity as its stage, that has as its very foundation a quality of God consciousness that is so very comforting. In the eternal light, there is that quality of the constancy and, yes, the changeless nature of the eternal. Changeless, not in the sense of being frozen in time in one state alone, but changeless in the sense that it is all of God simultaneously appearing. All that has been, all that is now, all that ever will be, are even now in their quality, there in the bedrock truth of the nature of the Godhead. And that eternal, changeless nature is already most apparent, as close to you as the mantle of your own Christ presence. Let us see if for a moment you can actually put on that garment of consciousness and enter into that comforting awareness of the eternal, universal Christ light. For example, those who have been students of Acropolis Sophia have come to know that basically the mortal evolution plays out in three distinct worlds: the physical world, the world of thoughts and feelings, those being the three parts of the lower expression that are subject to mortal qualification. However, in addition to those, there are other realms where perfection has been preserved by the very nature of those realms, and one of them is very close to the outer world of the human consciousness, that being the world of the Christ presence. World is called in the East the world of the faculty of Buddhi, Buddhi, which represents not so much the religion of Buddhism, but the faculty of divine mind and intelligence and life, all operating without any constraints of time or space. And this is an entire world of its own, for which the spiritual sun is the law and the center of that world. This is the home of the Christ selves of humanity. It is a realm that is as close as a breath. In fact, it is the underpinnings of this outer experience life that we have right now. When it is possible for you to shift the center of your attention and your conscious awareness so that you are able to retain your conscious awareness and you are able to, as it were, feel through the heart and be aware through the consciousness of your Christ presence, then you will be as rising up into the pure ethers of that Buddhic world. And there you will find that conditions are quite different than they are here in this outer world. For example, we have a whole variety of how nature on this earth expresses as the seasons of the year, as various extremes of climate or earth changes. We have, in addition here, all of the vicissitudes of mortal conduct of human beings taken collectively as nations and peoples. We have the rise and falls of economies and empires. We have all of those vicissitudes going on. But this is in stark contrast to how life is lived in this realm of the Christ aspect of your very own nature. For there you will find that there is a constancy of the soft white allness of the light that radiates forth with life and love to every part of life with an extreme bountiful givingness. This light has been pouring forth, and even the scientific community looking at our physical sun have observed the remarkable consistency of the behavior of the sun over billions of earthly years. Granted, there are cycles of sunspots, of solar flares, of solar winds that do appear to have some extremities about them, but compared to the overall output of the sun, its light and radiation and warmth, it is astonishingly consistent over millions and billions of years. Were it not so, life as we know it would not be able to adjust quickly enough to the sharp differentiations and changes that would occur. Now, how does that relate to you when you have to go back into your home environment next week? It relates in a very real, powerful way, because you have a choice of whether or not you are going to detach your heart and your consciousness from that inner life that is lived by your God presence and compete along with everybody else, scrapping for what you can earn, what you can manage to put it over on your fellow man, and more or less be governed by the ebb and flow of world events. Or you can decide that for you and yours, that there is a greater imperative available to you, that you are free through your cooperation with your beloved individual mighty I Am presence and the great measureless assistance of the Ascended Masters, that you will utilize the power of the emerald matrix and the emerald ray, as well as all of the other tools that God has given you, and determine that life as it is now lived in those realms of perfection shall be the law of your own experience. This is one of the great freedoms that has come to the Ascended Master's disciples, to understand that it is indeed possible for them not to conduct themselves and their affairs subject to their own mortal limitations, subject to the restrictions that are placed upon them by the world conditions that they are in, but that it is possible as far as their own personal life is concerned. It might not be something that can be superimposed against anyone else's will upon anyone else or everyone else, but conversely, it is lawful, possible, and ultimately going to be imperative that each one decide that the law of their own personal life is going to be the law of the life of the mighty I Am presence, of the ascended hosts, and is going to be facilitated as the mighty I Am presence flexes the power of its limitless light to focus that through the Christ and to send it forth, stamped as the evergreen, ever-emerald, ever-dazzling manifest perfection of the white light of the Christos, that it will be radiating forth in an unbroken stream of the will and concentration of the emerald ray, and that it will enforce that perfection of the Christos on your individual life. Now, we will grant to each and every one of you that if you, in your outer mortal self, were to attempt this, you would fail. Because it is not the outer self with merely its own emotions or its own mind or its own accumulation of energy that could produce such a miracle. On the other hand, when the outer self understands that its only truth and its only real identity is that God presence, and lo and behold, not only do we wish it for ourselves, but that it is the divine plan and has been the divine plan for the entire drama of our incarnation, then we realize that it is, in fact, the determination of that mighty presence to bring forth this mastery, to bring forth this perfection into this world of form. Why we look back, reading the record of coming back into embodiment time and time and time again. And we have heard from any number of students that they consider if it had been up to them, they might not opt to come back time and time again. They may never have opted to come into embodiment in the first place. And they've lamented what a faux pas they made when they decided to come into embodiment. But the Ascended Masters hasten to remind each and every one of you that it wasn't the outer self that made this choice at all. It was the mighty I Am presence. And the mighty I Am presence is going to come back into embodiment and come back into embodiment and come back into embodiment until the presence accomplishes its goal, which is that mastery over time and space, mastery over creation, and the actual bringing forth of that attainment of perfection. This is so we understand that even though we may have our own needs and purposes for bringing this forth, that as short-sighted and understandable as they are, they pale in comparison to the God determination and resolute will of the glorious mighty presence, that it will descend to this earth in the fullness of its own dazzling Christ consciousness, first through the heart flame, thence through the harmonious streaming forth of the life forces through thought, feeling, and action, but ultimately through the blending together of the Christ self with the outer self and the heart, so that that victory and that manifestation can occur. I'm sure that all of you are beginning to realize that your life and your series of embodiments is very much like that movie that was put out many years ago with a certain unfortunate young man who had the instruction of being born and born and born over again on the same day of the year, Groundhog Day. And although he could play around all he wanted to with impunity and end up the very next day right where he was, he also wasn't getting anywhere either. And so ultimately he did, you might say, wise up and realize that there was a greater agenda going on there, which is what we are realizing, that the God presence has its own agenda, which is its own overcoming mastery. And if it finds through the heart flame of the outer self that there are challenges in life, that there are adversities to be overcome, limitations that exist, that these are the proving ground for that glorious presence. Perhaps they will act as a greater stimulus and motivation on the part of the outer self, not to crumple up and collapse before that appearance, but to stand straight and tall and to invoke the light for all their worth, to hold the hand and to hold the thread of contact and to hold the door of consciousness open to the ascended master consciousness so that that mighty presence can come forth. We have the example, the shining example of those initiates who are now ascended, who have gone before and who have left us the indelible record blazing in the ethers of their demonstration of the capacity of that inner presence to overcome in this manner. We have proof positive that they have accomplished it, and we know that what they have done, others can and ultimately must do as well. Hopefully, out of all of this, you are beginning to get a more expansive co-measurement of life as you sit here today in this room. That there is the onlooking, unblinking, all-seeing eye of your own mighty presence, that through your Christ body is actually holding perpetual wakefulness, an alertness and a shepherding of your outer self, and that that presence is keenly engaged in accomplishing your victory. And you are realizing that it is possible for the unmitigated, relentless flow of that light from that presence to put into the place of every lesser appearance the absolute patterns of perfection of your Christ identity. Throughout this week and during the conference beforehand, part of what the Ascended Masters were striving to do was to begin a process of re-educating all of you into how it is that an Ascended Master conducts themselves, of how it is that your own God presence and Christ presence conduct themselves, of the high office of that blessed presence, individualized, whom you are. This being important because what is necessary to be done is for that behavior, those patterns, those broad shoulders of a sense of capability, of responsibility, and of divine authority. This is the part that you must learn to play. You must not only learn the lines, that is to say, if this were a play, the lines might be the lines of your decree, but you would also have to learn how to stand on the stage, how to wear the vestments of that royal personage that you were going to play, of how it wasn't mere play acting, but how you were actually maturing from the infant newborn baby in Bethlehem of the Christ into the firstborn Christos of your own mighty I Am presence. You will discover, if you have not already, that the more that you, in your outer self, can actually live the life and play the part of that glorious mighty I Am presence, the more your own thoughts and feelings will get with that program, and the outpouring in response to your conduct and your calls from your presence will send that forth into your life, and you will have much, much more efficacy in your calls than you ever dreamt possible before. So you see, the Brotherhood is seeking to raise up a company of firstborn Christed ones in yourselves, There is nothing wrong with humility. Certainly that is part of the path. There is nothing wrong with an innocence and a purity of consciousness. That too is a part of the path. You do need to have, as part of this, a great passionate adoration for the living presence of God, both of the individual mighty presence whom you are, as well as that presence as it is displayed before you in the light shining through the eyes of your compatriots on the path and of all mankind. And of course, the love that you bear to the ascended masters and to the one almighty presence. That also must be there. But you will also find, especially as it relates to both the blue plume, the blue ray, the green ray, and the white rays of God consciousness, that there is also a need to stand wearing all of the vestments that are part of the panoply of what it means to be an individualization of the universal presence. For each such an individualization is, in fact, born of the King of Kings, and thus a royal prince or princess, a royal personage in their own right. Thus, they have all of those glorious accoutrements of that office. You know, there is a saying that we have in this world, the clothes make the man. And so if you can imagine going from wearing your pair of overalls or exercise clothes, but instead putting on all of the vestments, all of the sacred robes of that which is the consciousness and the mantle of your Christ presence, putting on the crown of that God presence, wherein the attainments are focused as concentrations of light that look for all the world as if they were gemstones. But in fact, they're not really just ordinary gemstones, but they are focuses of truth, focuses of the Mercury diamond shining mind, focuses of the concentration of love as the ruby fire. All of these gemstones are actually rays of God consciousness. And that is the picture that is painted for you of your own Christ presence, that you are going to discover, if you have not already, that you will be obliged to put on, that you will be necessitated to wear that mantle and to insist upon that presence going forth into all of the affairs of your life. As you do this, as you put on that consciousness, you will come to understand that you are less and less joined at the hip with the news of the day that goes on in the world's marketplaces. Rather, you will turn to your consciousness and ask, well, what is the weather report today? In the heart of the sun behind the sun, it is even temperature. It is the same glorious light of perfection still shining today again. It is the same outpouring of the Buddhic light, the same vibrancy of life. And you will not complain about all of the constancy of that light. There's plenty of variation in the divine realm, but at the time, what will be more important to you is that, yes, today, as there was yesterday, your source is there. Your source of life, your source ultimately of energy, your source of everything that you need to draw upon is still pouring forth without any interruption. no ebbs and flows due to market disruptions or anything of that nature. And you will be so grateful to know that you have this constancy of this limitless outpouring from the heart of the presence that is there for you, and that you are no longer the cat's paw of all of those events that go on far and wide across the face of the earth. Now, the sons and daughters of God have so very much going for them. We would like to talk about this for just a few moments in terms of you understanding one of the mechanisms that takes place as you rise into this Christ light. It is absolutely very instructive when you think about it for a little while. There was a time when the incarnation of the sons and daughters of God took place, when the heart flame from the Christ presence and the electronic body first assembled for itself lower vehicles of thought, feeling, and the etheric double portion of the earth element. During those initial times, there was a blending and an overshadowing of the purity of the Christ light that held those lower vehicles as subservient and obedient elemental essences that were responsive in every possible way to the higher consciousness. There was not yet the fall of mankind. There was not yet a duality of appearance. And in its place, what you had is what we are talking about here today that you are returning to, which is the complete overshadowing by the Christ body, the Christ presence of the four lower bodies. And in that overshadowing, there is a magnificent streaming. Suffice it to say that each one at that time basically had their very own sun to use as a mind. It was a veritable pulsing outpouring of a streaming of light that was a concentration. It was a sun that was part of a greater interconnected network or web-like structure of all of the points of individuality in that cosmic Christ realm. So you had a sun for a mind. And when you thought, the light streamed forth as brilliant rays of light, and it worked in such a way that your mind, while it was in one particular point of focalization, was also omnipresent, because the light from your mind streamed forth everywhere and reported back to you conditions in that everywhere in the Buddhic realm. And so that is how everyone's incarnation began. Now, what occurred eventually is that the heart flame within those outer bodies of the mind and emotions began to fixate. Instead of the attention being focused upward upon the electronic body, it became more and more fixated and fascinated down and upon the material aspects of the earth element, as well as the aspects of thought and feeling. And as this occurred, there developed an actual separation of the flow of the sense of self from the Christ and the presence to the operation through these lower vehicles. And initially, what happened is shown very well in the allegory of Adam and Eve in the garden. And there you have the serpent intertwined around the tree who says, you're not surely going to die if you step over the line and bring into your world the relative knowledge of relative good and evil. So people thought that they could experiment and do so with impunity. And they said, well, I'll try it once and see if I get burned. And they jumped over the line, and then they jumped back quickly, and they said, well, that wasn't so bad. I'm still okay. And they tried, and they found that they could use the powers of their minds and their feelings to create just after their own outer imaginations. What they did not realize in that process is that imperceptibly there was a return to them of a very fine, imperceptible mist of darkened substance that was not so sharp a contrast that the outer consciousness was even aware of it. And so, since there weren't any repercussions to speak of, they figured, okay, let's do some more. And so, as time went on more and more, there was this infatuation and fascination, not with the Godhead, but with matter and the earth. And by the way, that explains a lot of the infatuation that people have today. It's astonishing to me how people can spend their whole lives studying bugs, studying bones that are millions of years old, studying little insects and invertebrates, and spend a whole career studying the mating habits of a mosquito. But yet, when you understand that there are who knows how many thousands of embodiments invested in those things, perhaps we should not be so surprised that people are so animated when it comes to the intrigue that they still have about this outer creation. The most important thing to realize about this is that it wasn't like one day you were in broad daylight and the next day there was a full eclipse of the sun. What happened is that it was an imperceptible dialing down over a matter of lifetimes, an imperceptible dialing, so imperceptibly that the outer consciousness did not realize that it was building up for itself its own asteroid belt of misqualified substance, which had the effect of obstructing the light of the inner worlds of the Christ presence, the nirvanic world, and the God presence. So in thought and feeling, there was built up this just general dampening down of emotion, dampening down of thought, and the incapacity to see beyond those worlds, because the very lens of perception was itself darkened. And it happened so gradually that it just became a self-perpetuating, self-fulfilling consciousness. The value in knowing about this mechanism is that as you sit here today, you can now perhaps a little bit better appreciate how and why it is that when you do your application and you make your calls, that everything doesn't immediately lift you into the ascension upon the instant, that you don't have instantaneous precipitations and alchemies, that all of that doesn't happen automatically, because unbeknownst to you, still at some levels in especially the realm of the memory body, which projects down into thought and feeling, there remains this polarizing, opaquing substance. It's almost as if a child were born with a pair of sunglasses on and lived its whole life in that twilight of those sunglasses and never knew what it was like to be without that twilight. Now, The value in knowing this whole mechanism is that what you are doing as students of the light right now is you are turning back time. You are unwinding the whole spiral of all of your embodiments with your application of the violet flame instead of that veil that separates you from the dazzling holy of holies of your own I am presence. You are now blazing your presence, and the Ascended Masters are blazing through you the violet transmuting flame, so that more and more and more that membrane of opaquing substance, the middle wall of partition, as it is sometimes referred to, of discordant thought and feeling, is being thinned and thinned and thinned more and more. And as it is transmuted and purified, it is replaced by this dazzling white light from the Christ presence, filling the mental body, filling the emotional body with that substance, so that what is supposed to happen is that the physical, emotional, and mental, just as over many, many lifetimes, they gradually slowed down and descended in their whole overall behavior and vibration. Now all of them must be re-raised back up, all together in unison by the light, so that you are raised back up into the essences of God reality, into the tides of universal light and life and love that are always there, but are unperceived because there has been the scales, such as fell over the eyes of Saul of Tarsus. Those scales were symbolically representing that consciousness that came upon him at that time. So now you are purifying all of that, and you're not only eliminating the discord of that veil, but you are putting in its place, in the mind, in the emotions, in the etheric double, in these outer worlds, you are bringing forth, and by you we mean, of course, the presence that is the doer. Your presence is bringing into these worlds, all the way down to the physical, the substance, the tangible ascended master light substance that flows through the open doorway from your own mighty I am presence and fills all of your world and displaces all of that darkness so that it has no place but must be swallowed up in the light and be no more, because it is not a reality. So that is the light that is going forth from your electronic body, radiating forth and holding you in the light of its perfection. As you do this, as you rise in attunement, you will discover that there is here and here, all of those inner worlds are all around you. They are all pervading. They are everywhere present. The great sea of universal light from which all of creation comes forth is right here. The Ascended Master realm is right here. I thought I'd share with you the story of a young man who lived many thousands of years ago. He had a fight with his brother. He had a problem with his father. His brother got so angry at him, his brother was ready to kill him. So his father and his mother made him leave their home country and strike out on his own. They gave him a little bit of a dowry, and they said, maybe you can find a wife from the in-laws of your mother. He set out on that journey. Some of the stories explain that on the way, he was followed by the minions of his brother, who stripped him of all of his dowry and left him practically without any resources whatsoever. So he was in a hard place at that time. And one night he put his head down. The only thing he had to use for a pillow was a stone. So he fell asleep. And as he was sleeping, lo and behold, the heavens opened up and he was lifted up so that he could see the angels of God coming down a ladder, and also other angels that were rising up the ladder. And God spoke to him and told him that he should not be afraid because God was with him, that God would go with him wherever he was and bring him out of this harshness into the fulfillment of the promises that God had made both to his father and to his grandfather. And upon awakening, this young man had the dawning awareness that this desert waste where he was none other than the gateway to God's heavenly realms. And that is the consciousness that each of you may have about your own life. Wherever you are, as you affirm it in the I Am name, the open door to the ascended master light that can come forth into your life and flood forth all of its light and life and love as radiation out into your life. The glorious thing about knowing this and setting it into action is as you actually touch the outpouring of your own electronic body, you come to realize that when you reach that attunement and you have set the law into motion, that the thing that is going for you is that there is positively no surcease of that outpouring. It does not stop. It does not become emptied out so that there is no more to follow, but it goes on and on and on. The other thing that you come to realize about that electronic body is that praises be in the realm of that mighty I Am presence. None of what's going on down here is in the consciousness of your own individual mighty I Am presence. None of the things, none of the shenanigans that you have ever done have ever registered on the consciousness of your presence. None of the terrible news releases have ever registered on the consciousness of your presence. Nothing of unhappiness or unreality. And consequently, your presence has an untrammeled, unhindered consciousness that knows no opposition, knows no such thing as anything other than its own reality. And when the light goes forth from your own electronic body, praise God, that light comes into this world, and the light that goes forth and meets conditions is indomitable. It cannot be defeated. The only way that it ever would be is if you prevented it from flowing by what happened in your emotions or what happened in your mind. Other than that, that light is indomitable and actually produces a perfect erasure of anything less than the allness of that presence. Now, there is a range, obviously, of how that light can behave in order to, in some cases, preserve and resurrect parts of life that are worthy to be purified and raised up intact into the higher octaves. In other cases, there's nothing else to be done except to just have that whole appearance be washed out of the memory of life for all eternity and never to have been as if it had ever existed in the first place. So that is the capacity of the light that goes forth from your presence. And that is what you are loosing with your calls, not only as transmutation, but also in this way of holding to the vision of the Christ perfection of your own divine Christhood here in this world of form, held fast by all of the actions of the emerald ray that we have been sharing with you this week. As you come to realize that this is the law that is impersonal, that you can insist shall come forth into your life and into the life of your community. And by the way, we have it on absolute perfect authority from all of the ascended masters that just as you can insist upon this for yourself, it is your prerogative in a universal way to, from your mighty I Am presence, insist that that reality appear in every other part of life as well. Not that you are mortally forcing things, but you can demand and command that all outer appearances in the governments of the world, in the economies of the world, in all of the places where there is violence, you may, in full divine authority, demand that your presence set those conditions right. That is your authority, because the presence is the owner of all of life. And you will find immense relief for yourself. You will not make new karma by doing so, because you are insisting upon that which is good for every single part of life. As you do this, and as the veil of misqualification is more and more thinned, then you will find that your own calls and your own God presence is able to act instantaneously upon the great sea of universal life. And that presence, one of whose great functions is to act as a creator, will produce and create, acting upon the universal through you, whatever might be the necessities of your life. We are looking forward, as we look to our Easter conclave even now, to expressing the great flood tides of God consciousness that are universal in their scope. The Christ light, the cosmic Christ light, the universal life of the presence, and the universal love of that presence. For all of these are issuing forth right where you stand, right where you sit. There are those universal aspects of God consciousness. And as that veil is thinned more and more, you will return back to that home in that seat of God consciousness, which your beloved mighty presence is. I'm going to invite all of you to rise and give with us once again the I Am affirmations, holding for yourself this awareness that as you give them, your mighty presence is speaking these words into the ethers. The universal of that mighty presence is everywhere present and is fulfilling in obedience and responsiveness to that which your presence is decreeing. And that it is like a fire enfolding itself, like a double helix that is coming down into your tube of light, that it is precipitating there in your world as the mantle of your Christ presence, stepping forth into form over your four lower bodies and going into every single person, place, condition, or thing that is affecting your future and bringing to that condition this dazzling white cosmic Christ light that is the mighty I Am presence in action.